Tuesday, August 10th, 2021. This is the Planning Commission. We are in the city of Ocean Springs. I will ask anybody that's able, please rise with us. I'll say a quick prayer and ask you to lead us in the pledge of allegiance. God, thank you again for the opportunity we have to serve the city and to serve you as we do so. Please help us to make good, informed decisions that benefit the city and her residents. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all. All right, if everybody would please take out their cellular devices, their watches, and their beat makers, and make them not beat makers for the next hour or so. I'm going to call this meeting to order. All commissioners are present, including our newest commissioner. Everybody point at Mike and wave. Say, hi, Mike. Hi. Welcome to the Planning Commission. Moving down to item number 2. We are going for approval of the minutes from the July 13, 2021 meeting. Does everybody have any chance to read this and have any comments? Got a motion, Marshall, to approve. Second, Allen. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? We are officially approved for minutes. I'm going to need my agenda, guys. I apologize for that. Moving on to old business. We have one item on the old business. That is 525 Jackson Avenue, parcel ID 601-379-811.
That is, we would prefer that be continued yet again. As you're aware that because of differences between the Unified Development Code and the regulations that affect prior to that, the way this lot split is set up, it would not create a compliant lot. So until there's some resolution regarding the Unified Development Code, we prefer that this not be acted on and be simply deferred to a future meeting.
That has been coordinated with the resident.
Yes,
I remember correctly, it wasn't an emergency or have to happen right away. So.
I know I talked with the applicant with him yesterday, and he understands the situation. I kind of thought he was going to be here, but he's not. So yes, he's fine with it.
Often we will defer this to another meeting if you do it twice and it has to start over. But I assume I think that will work.
No, that's pretty much that's a kind of a standard practice we have that.
But we're going to allow this one to be deferred indefinitely due to the circumstances beyond his.
Yeah, I mean it's beyond his
Special
yeah,
circumstances.
Exactly.
I have a motion to defer this item until such time that the UDC code is rectified.
That works.
Kevin, second. Marshall, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That is deferred to at least the next meeting. New business, item 4A. This is going to be 112 Hine Drive. It's parcel ID number 613-950-1000. Julian Lartigue. Did I get it close? Is Julian here?
Yeah, that's correct.
Was
Did
it all right? Did I good?
Yeah, you did. You got it right. Should I go with the mic or?
Requested the use of gravel or similar material to construct a driveway on a residential lot. Wade, I assume you'll give us a quick update on this?
Yes, I will. In this situation, the homeowner constructed a gravel driveway and a parking space on the south side of their house to provide parking for vehicles. They did this prior to getting a building permit for it. And as you can see from the photo, the gravel extends all the way up to the actual asphalt of the street, whereas under the development regulations, both UDC and pre-UDC, that there has to be a minimum 10-foot hard surface between the street and the gravel to contain the gravel in the yard. That wasn't done, but it is on the agenda for you to approve if you so desire, and then would go on to the Board of Aldermen for their final approval. Okay.
Julie, did you want to speak to that? Come on up.
Sure, yeah.
First name and address for the record, please.
Oh, we just want to add one thing. The staff is recommending approval, provided that the required 10-foot area of hard surface be provided between the gravel and the street.
Okay.
Sure. My name is Julian Lartigue. I live at 112 Hine Drive. I apologize for not coming earlier and getting a permit at the time. There was an existing gravel driveway that extended 15 or so feet. It's on the survey that we submitted with the shortly after the permit was filed. It's been there since we bought the house in 2010. I believe the survey in 2010 indicates the driveway is there. So we were just putting gravel beyond that existing gravel driveway to park our cars there. We took out our existing driveway, solid concrete up to the house. It drained poorly. We put down turf since then. So the drainage of the lot overall is much better now.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Given the was an existing gravel driveway, is it possible to keep that gravel driveway in place rather than putting down more impervious surface? We know several of our neighbors too, in fact, have gravel driveways that don't have a buffer.
So I'm trying to look at the thing, and what's the yellow outline?
That is the, I'm not close. Yes, that's the area that's now covered by, that is now covered by driveway. It was just grass and dirt and bushes before. And so that existing gravel driveway on the south side of the lot connects to this area.
All right, so the existing gravel did go from the yellow new area to the road. That
Yes.
dashed line that we
Yeah.
see going to the road is an existing gravel driveway. Okay. All right, thank you. As per our new approach to life, we ask if the audience has anything they want to say particular to this item, they're welcome to do so now. Does anybody else want to speak to or against this item? Okay. Do you have any comments or questions from the commissioners?
I have one. There was a mention of the city engineer about a traffic bridge water meter. Has that been addressed?
Not, at the present time, no, it has not. But that is one of their, their requirements whenever there is a vehicles driving over it, that the water meter be able to withstand the weight of cars, turning movements, and so forth.
Okay.
When we renovated the house in 2010, we actually had plans to put the driveway there at that time, and that was perfect. I don't know if it was extended to the permanent driveway. And the water line that was there, we made sure the people doing the work encased it in a way that it wasn't going to be compromised with vehicles going over it. I don't know if they took out the water meter box itself, but that's
Water meter box, plastic?
It is, yes. So that suggests it's not. So we could take a step of replacing that if that is necessary.
Okay, thank you. Alan,
Well, I was just saying to address what you said, it's allows me to technically have the ability to allow the removal of the surface as a requirement. He was asking.
Probably we could make a recommendation and not allow it, but I think we would be setting precedents.
Right, but I'm saying even to remove the 10-foot hard surface, practically we don't have the ability to do that. He can ask the board to.
Right, remember, we've had a couple like
Right.
this before where you have to approve it with the 10-foot, and if they want to appeal it, that goes to the board as an appeal. They they have the authority to say yes or no.
Yeah, also
Yeah.
there was an existing concrete driveway that was removed. He built a new gravel driveway to the right of the tree as you're looking at the house from the road. So it's not like he just re-gravelled an old driveway. He actually moved the driveway, which would say to me, you gotta put in the 10 feet.
Well, but there was both the concrete driveway and then where the gravel driveway goes in now, there was already an existing gravel driveway, like a parking.
Just didn't go all the way back.
The survey indicates that there was one there when we bought the house in
Yeah.
2010.
It's unfortunate because it's probably said gravel driveway here, but they drew over top of it.
Yeah, so it comes down
Yeah,
the street here.
Two really big lines right there is what we're hanging at. But to Alan's point, I think, could we recommend without it? Probably, but I think at that point it would be obsolete, like we could never not. So I would think it would be better in my interest, my personal decision, but we'll, so anybody else have any other questions for staff or the owner for general comment, consideration? No, let's stab at a motion.
I'll make a motion to recommend approval, use gravel for driveway and parking area at 112 Pine Drive, provided that a 10-foot hard surface is provided between the gravel area and the street as required by the DEC.
Got it. To Yeah, that just triggers something too. So-
It was required before.
So I would just get rid of the words.
Yeah,
Now, the UDC, because both codes have verbatim.
Correct.
As required by the UDC.
or just as required,
Yeah.
as required, because it's in both the previous and the UDC, so it's
Exactly.
just as required.
So your motion is request her to allow the gravel, provided they install the 10-foot hard surface required. Perfect. Second by Kevin, you got that? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed. That will be heard by the board next Tuesday, right here. And if you want to appeal the hard surface, you're welcome to do so.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. All of these I got out of order here. They're printed on the back today, man. Same paper, guys. Tax colors. All right, so item 4B is going to be a public hearing. The way a public hearing is going to work is we're actually going to start everything off with a motion to go into a public hearing. That will most likely pass. We will then be in a public hearing in which the staff will give us a quick update. We'll allow the applicant to speak, and anybody in favor of or against the application will be able to speak. We will exit public hearing, and then we'll make our motion. We'll do one, and others may make better sense. Item 4B is 6 Evelyn Drive, parcel ID is 611-882 at 000. Captain Peterson is requesting a residential short-term permit. Do I have a motion to go into public hearing? Motion Matthew, second. Second. Mike, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? We are in public hearing. I assume this will be a Carolyn.
You got it. The application in front of you is for 6 Evelyn Drive. The applicant also does live across the street in 3 Evelyn Drive, so that does satisfy the local property manager requirement. The notices went out to 53 people, and as of the meeting, we had not received any input. However, we did receive the list of names in support of, with 6 names that do support and do not provide any objections to the application.
Pause real quick, Kevin.
Mm-hmm.
So we received this today. Do I have a motion to accept this in the record?
So moved.
Motion Kevin, second. Marshall, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? You may
Okay.
this in the record, please. Sorry, Kevin, go ahead.
Oh, no problem. So the request was for 8 occupants and 3 vehicles, which was approved during an inspection. And given that everything was compliant and no complaints had been received, the recommendation is for approval for the short-term rental permit, subject to annual renewal.
How many residential permits do we have to do now?
We're real close.
This will make 48.
48, yeah.
48?
We do have some on the waiting list, so we have more applications than
The applicant, do you have anything else for staff before? Anything else for staff?
The only thing I'll say is on that public hearing notice says 2 Evelyn Drive.
Yeah, there was a typo on the notice. There is an existing one at 2 Evelyn Drive, so that was a typo. It was for 6.
And I did send out one to correct that, so they did receive the corrected one.
Okay. All right, is the applicant here? Would you like to speak? You're under no obligation. if you don't want to.
That's okay.
Did you do the artistic rendering of the cars?
It's effective, that's what matters.
All right, is there anybody in the audience that would like to speak in favor of the application for Evelyn Drive short-term rental? Anybody in favor of? Anybody opposed to the application that would like to speak to the board? Once, twice sold. Anybody want to speak about Evelyn Drive short-term rental? All right, do I have a motion to close public hearing? A motion by Matthew, second by
Second.
Joe, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed. We are out of public hearing. Does the commission have any questions or comments?
I guess my question, we're real close, are we at?
This would be the 48th.
48.
And there are more that are being reviewed, so as we've gotten to the point where we know that we don't have slots available, Amanda's been putting them on a waiting list and not taking their application fees, so those new applications are aware that they will have to wait for a spot.
Right.
So,
We have to hold spot number 49 for the one that's still in limbo.
Right.
108 Shearwater, and then we have an inspection scheduled next week for slot number 50.
right, so,
I mean, I have some more, I guess stuff that's not necessarily
Yeah, we can do that at the end.
Stay on the side for now. Do I have a motion on this agenda item?
Give it a try. Recommend approval for short-term rental permit for 6 Evelyn Drive, subject to any renewal.
Second. I have a motion by Joe, second by Alan for approval. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed. So Ms. Catherine, that will be on not this next week, but the first Tuesday of whatever month comes after.
There'll be September 7th is the next month that comes, yes.
Say September 7th will be the final board approval.
Okay, thank you so much.
Carol,
Yes,
is the board aware that we're at the limit?
yes.
Is there any action?
I have not received any directions, so,
We'll address that.
yeah.
Let's keep moving down to public hearing item number 4C is a public hearing for 3314, 3316, and 3318 Nottingham Road, parcel ID 610-991-05000, 610-991-0600, and 610-990-5800. Brown Mitchell Alexander on behalf of Singing River Health System is requesting a sketch plat and preliminary plat approval for the replat of lots 58, 105, and 106 of the Fort Bayou subdivision, or Fort Bayou Estates Part 4 subdivision. Easy for me to say. Do I have a motion to go into public hearing? So moved. Motion Kevin, second. Alan, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed. We are in public hearing. I assume Wade, is that you?
That is me, correct, yes. Okay, just a little bit of a brief introduction on this one and the following item is that they are tied together, and there's actually 3 components to this, both these 2 items. One item is the determination on your part of who is directly affected by this subdivision replat. That is a requirement of Mississippi state law. So that'll be incorporated into the motion that was handed out to you. Second component is the actual approval of the replat of the subdivision. Third is the rezoning of this. The overall goal of these 2 applications is to provide the hospital with some additional land area for additional parking spaces, but at the same time minimize the impact on adjoining homes. So the first part of this is the, as you call this out, is the sketch and preliminary plat approval of the replat of those 3 lots to basically take them out of the Fort Bayou Estates subdivision. And like you see on the insert on page 2 or 3, and there's a large one a few pages away, that the southern portions of those 3 lots, they're identified as lot 105A, 106A, and 58A, will be to remove those areas from the subdivision so that Singing River Hospital can purchase one of them, basically. The other's already owned by the hospital. Take them out of the subdivision so they can be converted to, I think in this case, parking spaces for the hospital's use.
Now, I'm sorry, I might have
Okay.
misunderstood. They're not purchasing the house itself, just the rear.
Just the
Yeah.
rear part of those. They actually currently own the one on the left side of the page, the one on the,
They own lot 105, they don't own lot 106, and the county owns.
Jackson County owns, correct. Sorry, okay. So they are actually purchasing the southern parts of those 3 lots to use for their purposes. The reason under Mississippi state law, there's a requirement that in order to revise a subdivision plat, the Planning Commission and the board have to determine what properties and owners are directly interested in the revision. Those people must agree in writing to the revision. So in this situation, Singing River Hospital proposes that the 3, the current owners are those directly interested who they have currently signed the application, so that those are the parties directly interested y'all can make a recommendation to agree with that, or if you, after discussing it, you feel there's additional people, that is within your recommendation to it.
Wait, as a
But-
clarification
Yeah.
to that, that would be that anybody we determine to be directly impacted would actually have to sign off.
Would have to sign in writing their agreement to the
to the
modifications. Exactly.
Relative to this item and not the rezoning, that's the medicine.
Yeah, it ties in with this item.
Yep.
Okay, as I said, there's an application pending, next item to rezone the area too. But staff is recommending approval of the replat for the reasons that it will provide additional area for the hospital, that the area that's removed will not change the conforming status of the residential lots. They will still meet the minimum requirements in area of the R2 zoning district, which they are located. In addition, the new property line will not make them non-conforming with regard to the setback. They will still be providing the minimum setback distance from the new property line to the dwelling. So it will not affect them in that regard. Also, the city will have additional better access to its lift station, which is that little rectangular bump out on lot 106. It's a lift station. Public Works will then have continue to have access to that for maintenance and so forth. So, with that, staff is recommending approval of the replat. And to mention, the sheet was handed out to you earlier. There are two motions that both go into this, and we're recommending approval of it as you see in front of you.
I asked Amanda to put up the other sketch because
That's wrong. Yeah, that's
I'd like to get one thing on the record. Wade and I talked, and Wade, please correct me if I misrepresent what we discussed. But so these next two items were received in advance of the judge's ruling.
Go ahead,
And our
switch it.
current trajectory is
we need to switch it.
review these under the
Put the memo.
UDC, as that was what was in place when the application was made. However, from my study, from what I noticed, your the sketch plat and preliminary plat approval processes were similar, if not identical. And relative to the next item, the CH zoning is a UDC designation, the 3C3 is what it replaced, but this would be a permitted use in both. So are we comfortable reviewing these under the UDC with the understanding that it should translate to the old code if not?
Yeah.
correct. That
The memo, can you get to the memo?
yeah, that this process for revising the subdivision is the same, or in this situation, it's the same whether or not it's pre-UDC or Unified Development Code. So we're comfortable moving forward with it, whichever way we end up having to go with it.
Do you have any questions on that before we call for public hearing? Everybody good? All right, got a motion to go in, no, we're in public hearing, we're not talking about. Is the applicant here? Would you like to speak?
Yes, please.
You make your engineer speak, he's sweating back there.
You can probably augment the discussion. I'm Pete Thompson, Administrator of Ocean Springs Hospital. And one of the previous photos, you can see that we already have parking that borders along behind the edge of Fort Bayou Estates. We also have a couple of spots that are already bordering the playground, and there's we're simply trying to fill that gap and extend that parking across and gain around 26 additional parking spots, which is greatly needed. And the majority of the project is happening over the easement that impacts those three properties. So this would be something that we feel would benefit the parking crunch. On some days, we're doing 35 to 40 outpatient same-day surgeries there. Obviously, the community's growing, which means the hospital's growing. And parking is a big deal for those who are trying to get services and get their procedures. So this would make good use, we feel, of unused area that would connect those parkings together so that we can expand parking. Glad to answer any questions you have on that.
When he's up here. I do actually have a question for Nick, and maybe you can explain it too, but the straight wood fence, and then there's like a small jog in a straight line here. Why does that little jog happen on lot 106?
In the center.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like from going from the left line to the middle line, it drops down about, I don't know, 5 feet or so.
Okay, so Nick Gant, Brown Mitchell Alexander, agent on behalf of the Singing River Health System, 131 Room Magnolia, Biloxi. So lot 105, which is the westernmost lot, is currently owned by the hospital. Lot 106 in the center is owned by Mr. William Barrett. And then the lot on the right, which is lot 58, is owned by Jackson County. So in order to get, because Singing River owns the house to the west, on the far west, 105, in order to kind of get maximum usage out of what we are kind of putting into this new zoning and making a part of the overall hospital meets and bounds survey, that is the maximum that we could take and still leave the remainder 105 a conforming lot with the setbacks. So we're taking the maximum out of that property and giving it to the hospital. In the center lot, which is Mr. Barrett's, we are only taking what's needed in order to make these improvements. Now the jog out that goes to the north, as Wade mentioned, there's an existing city sewer lift station that's behind his house. Currently, Public Works has to drive in from Nottingham Road across the front of his property to get back to that lift station. So this will help the city giving them access to that lift station. And then also to the right, there's lot 58, it jogs back down and just is in line with the existing fence and starts having it.
Okay. Makes sense. Anybody else have anything for the Do I have anybody in the audience that would like to speak in favor of, this is for the replatting, we're not to the rezoning yet, this is just kind of the reconfiguration of the lot lines. Does anybody want to speak in favor of that in the audience?
I have a question, if I may.
Yeah, come to the microphone and state your name and address, please.
Good evening, all. Giuseppe Caruccigliola, I live in 3310 Nottingham Road, and the corner here at the table is the lift station. Which lift station are we talking about?
This is
Somebody
behind,
can point it up on the map for me?
Yeah, it's a
this
little,
is behind William Barrett's house.
do you see it, Amanda?
Which lot?
In the middle.
Right here?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an existing lift
So I guess
station.
I'm into the hospital property, more like.
Correct, that exists today.
Okay. I have another question for after. Thank you.
For the next item, you need, a rezoning item, sir? You talking about for the rezoning item, the next item?
Yeah,
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
I just want to make sure you weren't walking away on this one and had something more to say. All right, anybody else have anything they want to say, still kind of in favor of this item? Or opposed? Anybody opposed to the reconfiguration of the lot lines? Anybody have anything else to say? Come on up, name and address at the microphone.
Are your microphones on?
Yeah, I kind of hear. They're not turned on.
Yeah.
I'm not hearing
Very
you very
harsh.
well.
They're on, you have to get a little closer to them. Yes.
It's very difficult to hear you.
Yeah.
I'm Jim Saunier. I've lived in Fort Bayou for 38 years. I own property there. Specifically, I own a property at 3301 Nottingham Road, and I live at 1226 Wilmington. I'm concerned about changing the zoning in an established subdivision such as Fort Bayou Estates.
So right now, we're not actually talking about the zoning. We have a whole separate item for it, just from a procedural standpoint. So if you want to speak specific to zoning, I'll ask you to hold your comments now and come back when we do.
Well, shouldn't the zoning come before plat approval?
No, sir,
No.
because there's nothing to zone right now.
Say again?
No, sir, because we have to establish new lines before we can zone it. If we zoned it first, then we would be zoning the entirety of the lot,
Which we're
wouldn't
not.
go through. So we have to establish new lot lines first to rezone the small portion at the hospital edge. So if your comments are relative to establishing new lot lines, then now's the time, but if they're rezoning, I'll call you back in probably 10 minutes.
That's a little confusing, but, I stand in objection, not anyway.
Okay. Noted, thank you. All right, anybody else in the audience want to speak in favor or against the
Yeah.
reestablishment of lot lines? That's what I was going to say. Anybody want to speak to the sketch plat and preliminary plat showing the new lot lines?
Just to reestablish.
Okay. Do I have a motion to close public hearing?
So moved. Second.
Okay. I had a motion, Marshall, second, Joe. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed. So we are not a public hearing, so there are two items that we need to address here for Wade and what he has said. The first item would be the establishment of who we believe is an affected party by this proposed replat. I don't believe it's in the packets, maybe I'm misremembering, but you know, I would think it would be limited to the 3 people whose lots are actually changing.
And that's who we have.
Relative to the plat change, certainly any other comments, or if anybody wants to take a stab at a motion to establish affected parties.
I have a question. We haven't heard from Mr. Barrett. He's amiable with his lot, his property going away.
Oh, he signed the application, and
Oh, okay.
both
So
the,
the application is signed by Singing River Health System, Mr. Barrett, and Jackson County.
Okay.
So they're all 3 applicants, so he is okay.
All right, thank you.
So if you find that those are the affected parties, then you can continue.
Does anybody want to make a finding of affected parties? It needs to be a motion, right? Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
I'll make a motion.
Okay.
Motion to find the affected parties are the owners of Lot 105, Lot 106, and Lot 58.
Yep. Second. Motion, Kevin, second, Alan, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed. All right, so that will establish who is going to be required to sign off if this does get approved and moves forward. Do I have a motion on the actual plat itself? And keep it in mind that this is sketch and preliminary in one, which we do allow on a, this would be considered minor subdivision.
well, it's a replat to it, to subdivision, so, but yeah, you can merge the 2 into 1 in certain situations.
All right, so do I have a motion on the sketch and preliminary plat approval for the replat of lots 58, 105, and 106 in the Fort Bayou Estates Part 4 subdivision?
I recommend approval of the replat of lots 58, 106, and 105 of Fort Bayou Estates Part 4 subdivision is approved in the application plat submitted with the application.
Okay, I have a motion by Marshall to approve as presented. Second. Second, Mike, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed. All right, so that item will be, is that going to be on the 1st of September, or does that go next week?
That gets re-advertised for another public hearing, so that would be on September 7th.
Okay, so now, the rezoning side of this is going to be item 4D, it's a public hearing for, can I just say the same properties?
Yes.
On behalf of Singing River Health Center is requesting to rezone from R2, which is a low medium density residential, to CH, which is a regional commercial. Again, these are UDC designations because the application was filed and that was the code we were operating under. But the equivalent code, the old code equivalents are similar uses, similar districts. Do I have a motion to go to public hearing? Motion Marshall, second. Is that Kevin? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed. We are in public hearing. Wade, I see you keep going.
That is me, correct. Amanda, would you move on to the next screen on that? I think it's one that has the yellow identifying where the area that's being rezoned.
And while she's pulling that up, we also did receive a objection letter.
Okay, it's in the rezoning.
That was not in our packet, so that motion to I got a motion from Alan to add this.
Yeah, we just need to always have the packet available.
Got a second from Joe, all in favor?
Aye.
All right. Mandy, can you make sure that that gets added to the record, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, if you give us 1 second, we're pulling up a better visual for discussion purposes.
Can't move forward till Ray talks. so.
Exactly, and he's not gonna talk until the visual's up.
I was, if I could, in the meantime, give you a little bit of a intro on the UDC versus CH versus
That's good.
C3.
Can you
And
zoom
that
a little bit?
the application is styled for the CH
And scroll.
Regional Commercial District, which is a UDC district designation.
Thank you.
Prior district title was C3, Highway Commercial. However, the uses permitted are essentially the same. But more important to this piece of property, to this development, that whether or not it's UDC or pre-UDC, would require C3 or CH commercial zoning to make this happen. So it would move forward appropriately whether or not whichever regulations we are operating under. But the specific request here is the rezoning of the hot property identified in yellow, which is the rear parts of those 3 lots, which was part of the previous revision to the subdivision plat. Those areas are proposed to be rezoned from R2 to CH Regional Commercial. The reason for this is that as I said, the intent is to develop those for additional parking spaces for the hospital. Now, one of the requirements for a change in zoning, whether or not it's part of a lot or whatever, is that there was a mistake in the original zoning, or the character of the neighborhood has changed to extent to justify the reclassification. In this specific situation, based on the previous action, the parcels have been divided from the subdivision. It allows them to be made part of the overall Ocean Springs Hospital parcel. In order for them to be put to hospital use, that zoning needs to match the rest of the parcel, which is CH Regional Commercial, which is how the hospital is rezoned. So that would constitute a change in the character of the Fort Bayou Estate subdivision and makes the zoning justified. In addition, the zoning is consistent with the comprehensive plan, which there are policies there under economic development to support the expansion of improved functioning of Sinking River Hospital. So with that, staff is recommending approval of the rezoning of those parts of those 3 lots, not the entire lot, but just that part shown in yellow, the rear portions of those 3 lots to the CH zoning district. And I'd be glad to answer questions from you.
I do have one quick question, Wade. I think, isn't another reason for considering the zoning is a demonstration of public need?
Yes, the public need that has to be demonstrated in there, correct.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else have anything for Wade on, before we call for public input? Nope.
Just one more thing to point out, just to settle any concerns, is the part that is not in yellow that is not being rezoned. So there is no property that will have residential houses on it that will be rezoned. The rezoning would not extend all the way up to the street.
And just to belabor that point, I'll speak louder too, and I have a microphone. Everything in yellow is what is being considered a rezone. Everything that's being considered to be rezoned is contiguous with the hospital property. There will be no commercial abutting Nottingham Road.
And
That
in
is
fact,
correct.
the pieces in yellow will be merged into the property, so it becomes one parcel. It can't remain as those little small pieces. So at the end of the day, the hospital parcel will actually have the funny little top on it there. Yes, and the entire hospital parcel will be zone CH, and the homes will still be R2.
And just to make sure we've got all our T's crossed and I's dotted, the character of the neighborhood has changed to such an extent as to justify reclassification. That doesn't have to be the entire neighborhood, it can be a portion.
I mean, it's just the portion that we are
The
dealing
portion
with.
that's changing.
Being rezoned.
Just making sure it wasn't the entire.
No, great,
Correct.
great point.
Absolutely.
All right, the applicant, do you want to speak again?
It's kind of related to my remarks previous, it's all tied together.
We split ditto in the minutes. I know there were some people that wanted to speak in opposition to, but first I want to call anybody that would like to speak in favor of rezoning this hospital parcel. Name and address first, please.
Randy Bosarge, Jackson County Supervisor, District 5. The hospital is in my district. I live at 511 Maple Street, Ocean Springs. The Board of Supervisors unanimously supports this project, and I've been on the site with Heath and Nick and everybody that's involved. John Gill was involved. We all met out there and looked over the project. And pretty much the highlighted yellow area is unkept drainage easement pretty much. So not only is it going to improve, it should improve the drainage in that area, it's going to allow some viable parking spaces for the hospital that they desperately need. And I'm totally 100% behind the hospital and their endeavors, and this is one that they need to be hopefully allowed to have. And the county's going to fund this, and we're going to make the improvements and hopefully be able to make it all nice for everybody in Ocean Springs and Jackson County to park at and enjoy. So any questions of me for the board? Thank y'all.
Nick, you come to the microphone. I got a quick question for you. DJ Supervisor Bosarge for that. You just want to very quickly break out the drainage issue, and I do see you have some piping and some new ditches on here.
Correct. So there's an existing ditch that's behind all these lots that's inside the drainage easement. As part of this project, and extending the parking will be extended over the ditch. So right now, we're currently evaluating just how much of the pipe, how much of the ditch we can move, but we'll get in there, we're cleaning that up, we're gonna regrade, and everything's gonna flow better from the west to the east, that existing structure that's over there, and then out, and then across the Fort line. As mentioned, I think it can be mentioned again, the only thing that's being rezoned are the proposed lots 105A, 106A, and 58A, which will be created as part of the previous public hearing replat. This will be made continuous with the existing eastbound survey of the Singing River Hospital parcel. Currently zoned R2 going to CH, we can't go parking in R2. So we have to make it a part of that overall as well in order to even have parking.
And also,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
okay, I just want to point out one more thing, kind of ties in. Like was mentioned with the replat earlier, the little bump out there on the lot in the middle, that's the sewer lift station. And by rezoning it, it will continue to have access to the south from the parking lot, as opposed to how it is right now, where the public works trucks have to come in off through the lot off Nottingham. So that will not have to happen any longer. They'll have access from the south.
Okay. And James, we of course are not the drainage review board, but I assume you were working with Nick on the drainage improvements, making sure it isn't going to hurt any neighboring people, not going to flood the hospital.
Well, the Public Works' review of what they've submitted so far, we don't have an actual, plan yet of what they're doing, but what they're proposing, the concept and everything is going to work. Okay. The only thing that Public Works is asking for is that, where the ditch is between the parking area and the lift station, we're going to need a culvert in there, and because of possibly losing one parking place, we're going to have access.
To the lift
station. If something goes wrong with that lift station, and there's cars parked all up and down, and we can't get there. So that's a consideration that still comes when they do the plans and stuff.
So you're confident it will work, and you're working out the details during the design review process. Perfect, thank you. Okay, does anybody else wanted to speak in favor of? Okay, let's see, Jim, I believe it was,
Yep.
Is that right? If you would like to come speak in opposition to?
Well, I know if I was speaking in favor or in opposition, I'm just trying to get a better understanding.
Well, yeah, I understand.
Just trying to get a better understanding of what's going on. As a longtime resident of the subdivision, and a past president of the Civic Association, who reformed it many, many years ago. I'm a little protective about what happens with subdivision.
Understandably.
And in trying to listen to you, because the acoustics in here and your PA system not working well with my ears, I'm trying to understand what you're trying to do. You've got those 3 lots there that are currently in Fort Bayou Estates and have their assigned numbers. It looks like you're trying to pull those 3 lots out of the subdivision.
Let me boil it down very, and this is an oversimplification, but very simply, the hospital is going north, what is that, about 20 feet?
About 20 feet.
Yeah.
That's an oversimplification, but basically taking the hospital's north line and just going up about 20 feet. So the 3 lots, of course, only one of them's a lived-in home now, but the 3 lots will stay viable residential lots, they'll stay R2 zoning. Only the yellow portion would be changed, and it's only to accommodate 26 additional
And
stalls.
is the hospital purchasing those 3 lots?
Yes, that's my understanding, correct? Yes.
In their entirety, or just the?
Just that little yellow sliver.
The hospital just purchasing those 3 lots?
Yes.
Only a
Yes.
small portion of those 3
Only
lots.
what's in yellow?
Yes, yes.
And why are those lot numbers changing?
Well, so there's a lot 105 right now, and they're creating a lot 105A. So the yellow part in the bottom left corner is lot 105A. It's a procedural matter at this point, what we're talking about now. They have to get the tax records right, we have to subdivide that lot into a 20-foot strip at the back. And then probably what'll happen, it won't come to us, but probably what will happen is they'll do what's called collapsing the lot later. And that will take those 3 little new properties and just formally adopt, bring them into the hospital lot.
And I guess I can help you clarify that. Because Fort Bayou is a platted subdivision, if you change any of the lines, you have to go through replat. Otherwise, it's really just like Andy said, cutting off the bottom of those and adding it to the hospital, but the paper trail has to show that you created another little lot and then sewed it onto the other one, so.
I understand,
Yeah.
because I once was on the planning commission.
Yes.
Way back when.
Right, so if it wasn't platted, it could have been done by quitclaim and it
Yeah.
would have never been seen.
And I chaired it for about 10 years, so I know where you are.
Yes, I understand it's complicated.
I'm just trying to understand, because I know there's a lot of folks back here from Fort Bayou who are, like I am, but they're trying to understand. You get a notice and you see 3 lots
Yeah.
for rezoning, and it looks like they're all changing.
I can see where that's concerning, and that's why I'm trying to emphasize Nottingham will be residential for every single property on Nottingham. There's no change to the Nottingham side, it's just the rear 20 feet that's changing.
So the current owners of the Second River Hospital now own those 3 properties?
They own the property to the left outright, they always did, or they, not always, but.
Where the little children's park is, they've always owned that.
The children's park is actually owned by the county. The middle property is privately owned. The hospital already owned the entire lot 105, but they had to subdivide their own lot for the same reason, to be able to rezone just the south part so that the rezoning did not go all the way to Nottingham.
But those 3 lots that will remain residential, will they still be a part of Fort Bayou?
Yes.
Or they're?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, the remainder on the north, the top half, which is north in this case, is gonna stay a part of platted, Fort Bayou Estate space.
Yeah, if you look at it before and after, all the subdivision will be the same except for the boundary, the bottom boundary of these lines, once everything's done and filed, so.
Because my concern is that if those 3 lots had been zoned C8 or HC or whatever that zoning is,
Yeah.
that could domino and be used as
Oh,
a
yeah.
precedent
Yeah.
to change all the lots down the road there. Anything that abuts the parking lot of the hospital, we have to be careful about the precedents that we're setting here. In and I really don't, I hope that we would never change the integrity of Fort Bayou Estates.
I will say for the record, if this put a C2 on Nottingham, touching the Nottingham line, I would not support it.
Right.
I'm sorry, C3, C8.
Any commercial, yeah.
I would not support any commercial going all the way to Nottingham Road. I'll say that for the record.
And but I'm concerned about down the road, 20, 30 years down the road, I don't want Fort Bayou to be changed again and using something like this as a precedence to keep it moving.
Right.
If that's the case, I have no objection. But I needed to come here to get a better understanding. And of course, that's the purpose of the public hearing. And like I said, I know that several people from the subdivision are here and probably as curious as I am about it. And certainly, because we have invested our time, our money, and our lives in that subdivision. So we want to keep integrity as much as we can.
And I guess this explains why we had to do the replat first, because you had to carve out the areas that you were going to be zoning commercial for the hospital so that it doesn't impact the rest of the subdivision. That's why we had to replat it first to change the boundary, and then only change the, yeah.
Having sat there before,
It feels backwards, but it's the proper documentation.
that's what upset me.
Yes.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you. Sir, you wanted to speak? Did you want to speak again?
I got another question after too.
Come on.
All right, I would like to know, on the yellow strip right there, it's gonna be cemented, asphalted and everything, what did the flood impact with them?
As far as the drainage?
Yes.
Yes, so that's what I tried to bring up. So we have no authority over drainage. We make no decision on drainage. The way it'll work is outside of the rezoning, outside of everything, there's a design review process where the engineer, which is Nick back there, Nick does his design, does his calculations, he presents them to the city. The city engineer is James, that's who I called up earlier. James will review that, James will look at the area in total, make sure that he doesn't see anything, and I mean, in short, it should have no adverse impacts to anybody in the area.
I very well understand that in the strip right there, we have all, which there will be the easement at this time, we have all the utilities running, and they serve all those properties.
In your yard.
So what's going to happen?
So, Nick, can you comment on that?
Yeah, so, there are a
Let's
few
say it.
utilities.
Yeah, let's do that.
There are a few utilities that run back there currently in that easement. And that's kind of why we are, I said earlier, we're looking at, hey, what do we need to pipe versus what can we move the ditch over? Because if we go to move the ditch over, if we got to dig down 3 feet or 2 feet, and there's a utility there, obviously we need to pipe that section. So that's kind of what we're evaluating now. What can we move, where can we move the ditch versus where do we pipe?
James, you're aware of any utilities and working with them on everything to make sure we're not adversely affected?
There's drainage back there, I mean, of course, that's gonna be moved, and, some of those areas had telephone in the rear easement. I don't know if that's still active or not, but when they get through their plans, they'll have a, 811 call and figure out where all that stuff is.
And I think some of the utilities were a little bit of a surprise to everyone. Yeah.
It's always a surprise.
Surprise.
Always.
Yeah, sewer line, obviously.
No, there is one.
Yeah.
Did you have anything else, or are you good?
My next door neighbors wants to ask something.
Come on up, name and address, please.
I'm Bill Houston, my wife Susan, we live in 3312, it's right next to the property that the hospital owns. We've been there a little over 40 years. And so we've seen what has happened with drainage all these years. And the drainage improvements have been fantastic, because we had problems over there where we flooded Nottingham Road. The point is that there's an easement in the back of the property, and I don't know how wide that is, and I know for a fact the sewer line goes through there, and all the high voltage power line, that all goes through there. As far as the cable lines, I think that, I don't know what cable one's done, I don't know if they're using it. The phone lines are going to fiber optic, and it all comes to the public property. So my question is, the 20 feet you're talking about, is that on the hospital side, or is it on my side, which comes up to the ditch?
So that'll be on the hospital side. So the hospital is directly below that yellow right there. So it's the hospital is just going up another 20 feet. So it won't affect, so I assume you're to the left, to the west of the, yeah. So your property will be unaffected by what we're doing. Not directly affected by what we're doing.
Right, but the thing is that somewhere you're gonna have a culvert in there.
Yes.
Maybe you're gonna have a closed pipe. You don't need to get the water off those properties.
They would not be allowed to work on your property outside of any existing easement.
Yeah, well, the other reason that all this work was done 20 years ago, or 15 years ago, is the property, when we first moved, was all pine trees back there. And as we started to become more concrete and whatever, water runoff, that ditch was overflowing like crazy. So, just to make it clear, who owns the easement?
I would assume the city.
All right, now, so if I go to the city and look at it, I can be able to find what that easement is. I can look at my property line, and in that easement is that ditch. And what you're telling me is on the other side of the easement, on the hospital side, that's where the 20 feet is gonna be?
I'm not telling you that. We're not speaking to the easement on adjoining properties. We're talking about those slivers. So I don't know. Like, I'm very comfortable saying I don't know the answer to that question. But yes, that answer can be found relatively easy through the city engineers.
You look at your survey, it'll show the easement on your survey.
Well,
And
Susan and I, like I said, we're right next to the house. They go up and have a very good relationship with the hospital, and we have no problem with it. My concern, though, of course, is that we don't want to have a drainage problem that John Gill and Susan worked on for 10 years to get fixed.
yeah, if you have one, it's because he didn't do his job. All right, James.
I say, once we have those plans, we can answer it a little bit
Thank you.
easier. Mhm.
Okay. Anybody else have any comments or questions? Come on. Name and address at the microphone, please.
All right. My name's William Stevens. I live at 3308 Nottingham. I just have a couple questions. At no point is there going to be an access build coming from Nottingham to the parking lot.
It would not be allowed. With what we're doing today, it would still not be allowed.
Okay. And the other question is, has there been efforts to optimize the space already available to the hospital as far as their parking is concerned?
They're parking in every nook and cranny, isn't it?
So I can speak directly to this because just this time, was it last year or has it been 2 years? It's been 2 years now. We did a essential parking lot reconfiguration where we actually went in, took out some landscape islands, added as many parking spaces as we could. But that was all, and I think everybody notices, you turn off Guilford, we closed that drive, that cut through, that was Campus Drive, added some spaces there. So we've done everything we can to add as many spaces to that side. Now on this back side, this is same-day surgery. So same-day surgery is seeing an influx of people needing to come and park their cars. So this is adding to that back side for the same-day surgery to add some more spaces. So
How long ago was it that y'all optimized?
so we added, what was that, 2 years ago?
Yeah, probably 30, from the reconfiguration, I think we got 38 spots in the front.
At the front of the
Yeah.
hospital,
Yep.
where all that was moved in the
Yeah.
front.
I believe it
And we actually have,
southeast corner too, right, on Ocean Springs Road.
Mhm.
so we have plans to add some, at that campus, old Ocean Springs Road, that's the Campus Drive. But the city is currently doing a sewer project through there that we are waiting for that to be complete before we add those parking spaces.
Okay. So my question is, 2 years from now, when the 20 some odd parking spaces that we get from these slivers that we're cutting off of these properties, when that's not enough, are they gonna start cutting more into these properties? What's to stop them from taking more of the property?
If they do that, they become non-conforming lots and it wouldn't be approved.
So
This is as far as they can go without it becoming a non-conforming lot, and then it wouldn't be approved.
I mean, they would, if they wanted to expand it, they would have to go through the
Same
same
process.
process all over again.
Very important too is, when you say take, they have no authority. I mean, I guess it is owned by the Board of Supervisors, so y'all get it in the domain technically, but there's really no, they would have to have willing owners to sell the property. So they can't just go and take it. They would have to do it. It would have to come through the same thing and, I mean, nobody can predict the future like that, but they can't just go take it. I mean, it's one of those things they'll have to figure it out in 2 years if this isn't sufficient.
Honestly, the next stop's probably gonna be a parking garage. We've already been talking about it, so might have to build a parking garage out there.
And see, I'm all for that.
Yeah.
I just,
But, I don't wanna tax you to build a parking garage, so
Yeah.
we're gonna have to
Trying to
figure
get
out a
more.
way to build one
Well-
without taxing.
I mean, I'm sure that a lot of people would prefer to pay the tax on a parking garage than to lose the integrity of their neighborhood.
I agree with you there, but when you tax countywide, so, everybody in the county might not be agreeable to that.
And I can say too that these made sense because this was an area where there is parking to the west, but it got, because of the configuration and the turn radius needed, there just wasn't quite enough room for these. So there's already some parking spots to the west that kind of curve down, and there's a building there. So, that it's just not conceivable that they would ask, but they would have to make the same case and same defense for those properties. But you can't, like the commissioner was saying, you can't create non-conforming lots. So they can't make those any smaller, and there's really not the justification at this point with the existing maintenance equipment there to do any other parcels at this time. It would be reevaluated, but we just don't see it as it's not an option that would help them at this time.
Well, I think his concern comes from the fact that you guys already have purchased a residential home under, so what do you plan to do with that?
We're, initially, it came about as an opportunity, and we have some future local tenants, staff coming in occasionally. We thought we could set that up for them to, if we had a doctor coming in to cover heart surgery for a weekend. That was kind of one of the things we thought of. We also knew if we had to reconfigure this parking, then we'd be able to agree with ourselves, for that little slither. It most likely would end up probably, if we had no use for it, we would sell it.
We recently bought Dr. Diaz's old office too, right behind the hospital's emergency room, to use that for parking. So, like I said, we're stuffing parking in everywhere we can. So,
Okay, so your intentions aren't to eat that part of this part of the neighborhood? Like, this is all you want right now?
that's all we need.
And you have no intentions of taking more? Which exhaust every other opportunity, every other...
Not as long as I'm in office, that ain't gonna happen. I'm not gonna encroach on, I'm about as protective of Fort Bayou as John Gill is, so, John Gill and I have had this discussion multiple times. So.
I'm new to the neighborhood, and I planned on being in that neighborhood until I die.
Yeah, no problem.
One thing I'll add to your point to hopefully quash it. So Kevin made a point earlier that a change, so we would have to determine there'd be a change in character in the neighborhood to even rezone this. Kevin made the point earlier, the neighborhood, because of how it's done now, the neighborhood's a very small sliver. If they tried to knock down the house they owned and parked all the way to Nottingham, they would have to rezone the entirety of that property. If that were the case and it starts touching Nottingham, then I would make the case that then the neighborhood becomes the neighborhood. Instead of like this 20-foot strip north of the hospital, then we're in Fort Bayou Estates, then we're on public road. So that would actually, it would have to come back to us if they tried this, 2.0 and knocking down that house, and at that point we would consider the whole neighborhood, and I don't
You can't
know
make
any
that.
commissioner here that can say Fort Bayou has gone to where we need to park, the entirety of it.
Yeah. It becomes a different conversation and not one that would go well.
Yeah, the interested parties now become everybody in that neighborhood.
Right.
I think so too.
All right, well, thank you for doing. That's all I had.
Jennifer, you want to speak?
Yeah, just really quickly,
Name and address. Special person in my meeting.
yeah, I like to give the address, but Jennifer Burgess, Alderman Ward 1. So, John Gill and I conversed on this. He was on site, and then I was kept in the loop, because this happened kind of prior to me being sworn in. I have spoken with Heath. I have worked with the hospital. I feel comfortable with this. I have fielded all kinds of questions in regards to what ifs and what can happen. And they were all valid concerns. I live in Fort Bayou Estates as well, so I had some of those concerns too. So I have been doing, what I can to assuage those concerns. I think the hospital is part of this community. The last thing they're wanting to do is a hostile takeover, which is exactly what they will have on their hands if they go any further than this. And as long as I'm alderman, that's the integrity of Fort Bayou Estates is going to remain, absolutely. And I feel very confident that this is not going to go any further. So for the members here, whoever's listening, that's kind of where we stand. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, anybody else? Go ahead, ma'am. Name and address of the microphone.
I am Susan Musa. I live at 3312 Nottingham Road with my husband. We've been there 40 years. And we're right next door to the house that the hospital bought. And I was curious to how many feet into the residential part of the property will you be building the parking lot?
Well, it'll be on the property adjacent to you, and it actually
About
curves
20.
in. I don't know that any of us can tell you an exact number, but honestly, it looks like behind that property, the parking would remain on the hospital side. It would just be the ditching and utility locations that would be in the new area. Is that fairly accurate? I kind of want to speak to your plans.
Yeah, I don't know that number. Shame on me for not knowing that exact number. But yes, that is as it bends, starts to bend. So the reason for taking, as mentioned earlier, most of that property, to be absorbed into the hospital was because that's the maximum we could take. Not that all that is needed for the parking, but as that bends around, that's kind of just where it kind of clips that corner.
Yeah, sorry to cut you off, but you do have a
that.
dimension for 12.53 feet.
Well,
So
there we go.
It will go 12.53 feet back on the property.
And that's not the
And that's not
parking
even
spaces.
the asphalt that is good. Not the asphalt that is.
Into the residential property.
The currently zoned residential property, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am. All right, anybody else want to speak while the floor is open?
Having of those vehicles behind the properties, what's the noise level's gonna be? Alarm's gonna go off, maybe,
They have
4 o'clock in the morning, 1 o'clock in the morning. I love Ocean Springs Hospital, okay, I've been a patient of Ocean Springs Hospital. It's very close to us, they do good service. But we're talking about something commercial and something residential, just like Mr. and Mrs. Musa, 40 years into the same property, just behind the hospital. We are new, not so much, about 7 years, next to Mr. Musa. And our fence boards with the hospital property. So concern is noise level.
So, two points. One, they do show a wooden privacy fence on the back. I assume
That's
the
required.
stay and the intention. So from a, headlights and things, that privacy fence should knock that down. From a noise level, they're already parking, there's already cars. I mean, I don't see it.
No, over there, not behind my house, not behind Mr. Phil's house. We don't have nothing over there.
I don't see any behind Mr. Barrett's house. I do see some behind here.
If you see that white car, that's an existing one. I think that's the last existing up on the far left. That's the last existing parking lot,
But they're not extending
parking
parking
space.
behind anybody other than Mr. Barrett, and Mr. Barrett has signed off on the application.
Correct.
So there won't be anybody that's, or directly has a parking stall added to behind it, other than Mr. Barrett.
And I think he can attest to that section of the hospital is outpatient, so there's gonna be specific hours correct? I mean, people can park from wherever if they want to throughout the hospital.
It's,
But
yeah.
mainly back there, there's physician parking,
Yeah.
and then,
The most active parking back there is probably 8 a.m.
Yeah,
to 3
8
p.m. Monday through Friday. It's going to be the most traffic. But we're not adding any additional parking behind the Musas or the Anglins. It stays as it is. And y'all got a pretty good buffer there now with the way that you have some trees and different things. None of that will be disrupted.
Okay. Anybody else? Once, twice, sold. Motion to close public hearing. So moved. All right, so we are out of public hearing. Sorry, Second. Motion by Matthew, second by Kevin. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed. Now we are officially out of public hearing. Quick synopsis: we are looking at the yellow highlighted things from before. We are considering the rezoning, so we need to be very apparent that we feel there is or is not a mistake in the original zoning, which I don't feel there is. There could be a change in character of the neighborhood, which I would say with the growing community referenced by the hospital, I would add in an aging community, just kind of nationwide. I think that we can make the argument for that. And the public need, being access to the hospital, I think that's a strong argument as well. Does anybody have any other comments?
And this would be contingent upon the replat approval.
You may want to take a stab at a motion.
Just they would go at the same time.
Make a motion to recommend approval of the rezoning of rear portions of 3314, 3316, 3319 Drive, as described on the plat, lots 58, 45, 6, Estates, Parkville subdivision, from RPC family to C3 highway commercial.
Joe?
Second.
Joe, second Joe. Motion Alan, that is for approval as presented. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? I assume this will be on the first one in September? as well?
It'll be advertised for this second public hearing, yes.
Okay. So for everybody in the audience, we are just recommending this be approved. The board will have it on another public hearing at the board meeting on the 7th of September. And that would be, after that would be when it was finalized. I guess technically 30 days.
Yeah, technically 30 days once
For
it's
all
filed.
intents and purposes. Okay? All right, so, moving down, item 5 is if anybody in the audience wants to speak to a non-agenda item, anything you think the planning commission needs to be aware of? Yeah, we don't get very many of those. Commissioners forum, I think Marshall and Alan have already indicated they have something to say in their commissioner forum. Anybody, Joe? Yeah, Marshall?
The only thing I had to say was, at the last meeting, so.
Officer elections, who's supposed to do that?
Well, this is the first meeting
Right.
that everyone's all together, so we'll actually do that. at the
We're
second.
delayed a month
We're delayed a
because
month
of the
they
election.
extended it.
So that'll be at the next meeting. Had to give Mike at least one meeting to,
Yeah, I just wanted to address the whole short-term rental issue with coming up. Just wanted to address the whole short-term rental situation with coming up to the count and just see if we could ask the board or whoever we need to enforce the permits, because what we're seeing is a tremendous amount of people operate short-term rentals in city limits without a permit.
If that's happening, it needs to be reported to our office. We act on any reports, but we're not aware of any right now. So I would just say for anyone, if you see one operating within the city limits and, just contact Amanda. If it doesn't have a permit, we send out a letter and an application, and then we can enforce.
Well, I think that's fair, I guess. I mean, we can go on the RPO and probably pull up 20 right now. And
Well-
that's kind of what, how do we deal with that?
Well, VRBO, and also there's so many, at least half of the ones that say Ocean Springs on the websites are not in the city limits. So what we ask is that if anyone even suspects, we do that research. So if somebody suspects, we get it both ways. Sometimes people say, I know my neighbor is doing short-term rentals, and sometimes it pan outs and sometimes it not. But we do the research, and then we approach that property owner and ask them if they are, and if you know, and take them through, give them the opportunity to apply, but it's basically a cease and, you know, stop your activity until you have a permit.
Right, and I know, like, I think the maximum fine is $1,000 a year.
It can go, Steve, if they don't respond, usually we give them a warning letter. Some people don't know they need a permit, so we give them the warning letter that says, in case you didn't know, you need a permit. Here's your application, stop renting until you have a permit.
And I follow up to make sure that they take those advertisements down.
Yeah. Well,
Otherwise, we'll continue the enforcement.
I can point out a number that are in the city limits that aren't operating with a permit, that are booked 60 days out.
email those addresses to Amanda and we'll get right on it. I mean, we do that not very often, but if we don't know about it, because we don't, yeah, we just need somebody to report us via email. Just send Amanda an email, say that this is a suspected short-term rental. And right. Absolutely, and we've had a pretty good track record. I tell people the only problems that we've had with short-term rentals are the ones that aren't permitted. So, but once we establish that they're not permitted and they're active, the ordinance is very strong in allowing us to shut that down if we are alerted to the activity.
To that point as well, I think in the future we should, hold that against people that are then coming in for an application. I don't know if we have the ability to do that right now.
We do. We do. If that part of the reasons or that you can give to revoke or deny a permit is previous, basically, of any code, in codes and ordinances.
Is there a database that we keep?
Yeah, we have a spreadsheet that everybody who's had one before that didn't renew, that, so we've got that and we track that, and Amanda stays on them every year to renew, and they have to get re-inspected. And it hasn't happened yet, but, when they get re-inspected, she also checks to see if there's been any complaints, either through police or code enforcement, and so far, so good. But if we did come up with some complaints, say they had a tent, they were renting to people and not monitoring themselves and allowing loud parties, and we got one that had a noise complaint all the time, that's the ones we need to know about. So and that's for anybody. If you are aware of one that's operating and you're not sure if they have a permit, call. If they don't have a permit, then we'll start enforcement activities. Yeah.
If I could make a suggestion, there's a great database out there, AIR DNA. It's a market research for Airbnb as well as VRBOs. And they actually show 151 rentals in our area. Now, granted, some of those may be in Gulf Hills, some of them may be
there's a lot in the county.
right in the county. But if someone was to actively look at that on a regular basis, they may be able to find some of these offenders.
Yeah, and we weren't aware of that one back when we passed the ordinance. All that was still kind of being formed, and there wasn't a good place to go look. But that's definitely a tool we'll put in our tool belt.
I'll say the only reason it came up to me is a friend of my son's was staying the night because his parents were Airbnb in their house.
Right.
And I think that they don't have a permit.
Yeah. So without getting in trouble, you can anonymously let Amanda know, and we'll get on that. Yeah. That's why when my friends come in town, I make sure I give them a list of the permitted ones, so it doesn't. Yeah. But yes, we can. All they have to do is call our office, and we'll give them a list. I'll check with the attorney and see what we can and can't give out as far as people's information, but we certainly. Yep.
Well, have to call somebody and ask. I can find it.
Yeah, we'll work with it, at least upon request.
I was looking at Amanda sent me the list, and I'm looking at it versus what I'm seeing online.
Yeah.
And I know the house.
Well, it's
I can see them
right.
where they are.
When we first were creating the ordinance and looked at it, there was about that number, about 100, 150, and I think it's probably a third of those condos down on Beachview counts for the vast majority of them. And then there are some in Gulf Hills and outside St. Martin. But yes, anything that is in the city limits, if we're made aware of it, now it's not something we're gonna constantly, we don't have the capacity to just constantly hunt. So we ask people, just shoot us an email if it's suspected, and then we'll take it from there and monitor it. And even if it's sometimes, in larger cities really have this problem, people who are trying to avoid permitting go from website to website. They'll leave it up here for a little while, they'll take it down, put it up over here. It's like playing whack-a-mole. So we don't just go look at the website. We don't have the capacity to look at every, but if there's database is monitoring that, then that will be a good tool. So we do rely on people, filing complaints or just notifying us of a suspected short-term rental, and we will take it from there. Right. Right, and right now, like I said, we have had a really good experience, knock on wood, with our permitted short-term rentals. Not only are they not a problem, they renew, and we haven't had any complaints, but we've had a handful that we had to send enforcement letters. Only one actually made it to court for a fine to have them stopped. Some didn't know they needed a permit. Some pretended they didn't know they needed a permit, but either way, once they saw what the fines were going to be, they stopped, at least for the moment. They might have started up again, and we just need people to tell us.
So back to my earlier question,
Mm-hmm.
Andy said hold it until the end. Where are we on expanding that number?
I have let the mayor and aldermen know that we were approaching, because every time one of these goes to the board, Rob always asks, what number is this? So I started putting it in the memos to the board, what number it is, so he would stop asking. So they are aware that we're approaching the cap, and I've just let them know to give us direction if they want to modify or remove the cap. And I haven't gotten any of that yet.
Commercial is by right.
Commercial is by right. Now, they still go through the same permitting process without the public hearing, yeah.
And it does not count against.
It doesn't count against the cap. So it's just any residentially zoned property. So I will check back in with them, especially with this one going and us being so close. And now we do have new administration. There's a couple of new people. So I'll just pitch that to them again of, hey, it's coming up, and ask for direction.
Yeah, well, it's back to the speech I give every time we have a PRO
Mhm.
or whatever, short-term rental. That's a way the city can control
Right.
what's going on. If you don't have that number, then you have people renting properties, and you have no legal recourse against them. But they can't apply for a license if you're already at it, so you have to cut the number before you can say you got to register your property.
And to be fair, the cap was set when we didn't know what was going to happen. So,
To be fair, I think those people know that they need a permit or not.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but they, doesn't make any difference now, back then, we said, well,
Right.
But if they've been doing it for 6 months, they could have.
yeah, they could have been in line before this and possibly had a chance. So, yeah, for some people, though, if they find out about it now or purchase a house and they're like, well, I can't get one, so I'm just going to do it under the radar. It could happen. But either way, I'll ask for direction again. And if they want me to look into it, we'll come back with some recommendations on either expanding or leaving it alone or removing it altogether. But I think the concern is that it was just going to blow up, and honestly, it hasn't. It's not that we've denied any, they just come in very slowly.
Okay. Anybody else?
We adjourn.
Okay. Motion to adjourn by Marshall, second by Mike, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
This is left.